Very good morning to everyone. I respected chairperson and respected inaugurator Professor R.K. Satpathy sir and our guest of honor Joseph Patel sir and respected guests and all the participants. I, Bondita Borbora, coordinator of the workshop, on behalf of entire organizing committee, welcome you all to the inaugural session of this workshop on governance and development issues and challenges. This workshop is organized by Center for Ethnic Studies and Research, Guwahati, in collaboration with Indian Council of Social Science Research, NERC, uh, along with two associated institutions, the Department of Political Science, Moridhar College, Dhemaji, and Sinamura College, Jorhat. As it is actually late, we already have to start it at 10 a.m. So now we'll go according to our agenda. As per agenda, I would like to request our chairperson, Dr. Dipen Saikia sir, to deliver his welcome address. Sir.
Thank you, Bondita. Very good morning to all. Respected inaugurator, Professor Ashwini Kumar Mahapatra sir, Center for West Asian Studies, School of International Studies, JNU New Delhi. Keynote addressee, Professor R.K. Satpathy sir, Regional Director, ICSSR NERC. Guest of honor, Professor Joseph Patel sir, Associate Professor and Head, Department of Political Science, JTGMDC, Roing, Arunachal Pradesh. Dr. Anil Saikia sir, Retired Principal, Moran College and Senior Advisor, CESR. Resource persons of the week-long workshop and learned participant friends. First of all, I, on behalf of the organizing committee, welcome you all to this week-long international workshop on governance and development issues and challenges. Friends, all of we know that governance and development is an important, frequently used phenomena nowadays. The concept of governance is not a new concept, but recently the concept is being increasingly used in development literature. Simply, governance means the process of decision making and process by which the decisions are implemented. Since governance is the process of decision making and implementation, so there are some actors who involved in decision making and implementation. The government is one of the actors in governance, and other actors of governance are very much depend on the government. Though there are different actors or organizations in governance, but out of all actors, the government plays an important role in governance. Thus, development is very much depend upon the good decisions and policies of the government. If the government take the policies for the development of the people of the country and implement it properly, then development of the nation can be realized. Thus, development is very much depend on governance. Without good governance, a nation cannot be developed. Keeping in view the importance of governance for development, we organize this week-long international workshop on governance and development issues and challenges to discuss its pros and cons of governance and development. In this regard, we are very thankful to Director ICSSR NERC for giving collaboration to organize this week-long workshop. Dear friends, your source of inspiration for us. There may be some unintentional lacunas in organizing the workshop. Please excuse us if there is any errors, and don't hesitate to inform us the errors of the organizers. At last, I, on behalf of the organizing committee, once again welcome you all to this week-long workshop. Hope your active participation will make the workshop a successful one. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dipen Chakia, sir. Now I request Dr. Dipen Das, Organizing Secretary of Center for Ethnic Studies and Research, to speak few words about the organization. Dr. Dipen Das.
Thank you, Ms. Mondita Barbara. A very good morning to all of you. Respected chairperson, sir. Respected inaugurator of this 7 days long international workshop, Professor A.K. Mohapatra, sir. Respected keynote speaker, Professor R.K. Satpathy, sir, Professor of Political Science, NEHO, and Honorary Director, ICSSR NERC Shillong. Guest of honor, Dr. Joseph Patel, Associate Professor and Head of the Department of Political Science, JT GMDC College, Rohing, Arunachal Pradesh. Dr. Anil Sogia, sir, Senior Advisor of CESR, and all the office bearers of Moridhol College, Sinamar College, and Center for Ethnic Studies and Research, and all the learned participants. At the very outset, I'd like to welcome you to all to this workshop. So let me introduce this center. As you all know, the Center for Ethnic Studies and Research is a registered academic society which was established in the year 2015 on 31st January with an objective to organize workshop, conference, seminar, lecture programs on divergence of socio-cultural and ethnic issues. Since its inception, we have been doing a lot of work for realizing our desired goals. Being an academic and cultural body, we have been published 6 books and 1 half-yearly peer-reviewed journal entitled Journal of Humanities and Social Science Research. In 2019, we have collaboratively organized 1 national workshop on human rights education, issues and challenges, which was sponsored by ICSSR and NERC Shillong. And that workshop was organized collaboratively with RG Borua College, Guwahati. In 2015, we have organized 1 state-level folk dance competition to promote our ethnic and folk culture. In 2016, we have organized 1 state-level seminar on Bihu Festival and a performing art form. Apart from this, to encourage the people who are working for the cause of development of ethnic language and culture, we have also introduced 4 number of awards, and these are providing to eminent personalities of Assam who have been serving for development of ethnic groups of Northeast India in general and Assam in particular. As we all know that Assam has got a heterogeneous demographic composition. People living in this region are belonging to different lingo-cultural and ethnic groups. And all these groups are having their own distinct lingo-cultural and ethnic identity. And by considering this fact, during this pandemic period, our organization have made an attempt to organize a number of webinars on ethnic issues and workshops so that the academician and research scholars could get benefited out of it. We have altogether organized 13 numbers national webinars on various ethnic issues, and also it includes some contemporary issues like New Education Policy 2020 and abrogation of Article 370 and present-day Kashmir, etc. And this 7 days long international workshop on governance and development issues and challenges is also a part of our academic exercise during this pandemic period. And this workshop is collaboratively organized with ICSSR NERC Shillong and Department of Political Science, Moridhol College, and Sinamara College, Surat. In this regard, we are very much thankful to ICSSR NERC Shillong, more particularly Professor R.K. Satpathy, sir, Honorary Director of ICSSR NERC Shillong, and Mohapatra, sir, Dean School of International Studies, JNU, Delhi, for offering your helping hand towards us for making this program fruitful. I hope all the participants will be able to learn a lot from this workshop. With this, I conclude. Thank you, Mondita.
Thank you, Dr. Dipen Das. Today we have invited Professor Ashwini Kumar Mohapatra, sir, to inaugurate the workshop. Professor Mohapatra, sir, is with us now. Professor Mohapatra, sir, is the Dean, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Professor Mohapatra has successfully guided research works of over 70 PhD and MPhil scholars, apart from a self-authored book on foreign policy of Turkey, continuity and change. Sir has also published a number of research papers and in referred journals. Professor Mohapatra was visiting professor at different universities of Japan, France, and Brussels. He has also visited abroad for many times to take part in different academic and civilian programs, especially peace and conflict resolution matters. Now I request Professor Mohapatra sir to inaugurate the session with his valuable speech. Mohapatra sir.
Hello, good morning
Yes.
to all of you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, very outset. I apologize for the delay by 10 minutes.
Sir, can you adjust your video?
Yeah, my video is on.
Video is on, but
Yeah.
we cannot.
Yeah, you can see me now.
Oh, sir. Yes, sir. Now we can see you.
Thank you very much, particularly the organizer of the webinar.
Hello. Hello.
I think perhaps there is some problem with his audio system.
Yes, sir.
Just you can call over phone.
Yes,
it's not audible.
Dependents, please contact sir.
Hello, am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Now you are audible. Yeah.
Yes, sir. You can continue.
Yeah. But there's some technical glitch got disrupted in the middle. So I'm extremely thankful to Dr. Dipendas for having invited me to as a chief guest of this two-day international webinar on governance and development issues and challenges. I also feel a little privileged and also honored by the number of educational institutions and the think tank which have initiated this exercise, uh, like uh, like we have the Center for Ethnic Studies and Research, CISR. I think it's a think tank based in Guwahati, Assam, in collaboration with the ICSR. Northeast Regional Center. Here, obviously, credit goes to Professor Satpathy, who is the regional director at the moment, and in association with MSGK, Social Science Research Center, Sinamara College, Jorhat, Assam, and Department of Political Science, Murdhan College, Demaji, Assam. So I think it's a kind of collective approach on part of some of the think tank and the educational institutions located in Assam to discuss a very important theme, that is the governance and development, and specific in the context of Assam. As a student of international politics, I feel tempted to define what governance and development is. Before I do that, I'll try to highlight its contextual relevance, particularly the contextual relevance of the theme that we're going to discuss in the next 2 days, including today. Uh, See, at a time when we have the democracy decline globally and the rise of authoritarianism, especially since the outbreak of the pandemic, all of you might have, in varying degree, observed the authoritarian tendency globally evident. And this authoritarian tendency is not simply reflected in the way as particular country behaves. For example, its aggressive attitude, approach, or its posturing. Like, for example, the People's Republic of China Similarly, you might have observed the behavior of Rasa, even to an extent when West Asia, for example, Turkey. You know, number of countries which are either traditional democracy or illiberal democracy or outright authoritarian in nature. So at a time, you know, when we are confronting with this issue of the authoritarian behavior, which is organically linked to the aggressive foreign policy approach of many countries, thereby creating a global condition where the very system based on rules and norms is being threatened. So it's not only the question of India's territorial and ontological security, it also concerns majority of the countries globally. See, when we have the international fora, even in case of the governance and development, right from the 1990s up to 2012, the Rio Plus 20 conference, when this whole concept of governance development has undergone the periodic changes in conceptual part of it, in semantic aspect, its implication aspect, but then it requires the collective efforts. But if you have some countries which are authoritarian nature, I don't know how you're going to apply governance. I get your point. So the governance per se constitute a challenge to many intellectuals and scholars, academicians across the world. We sitting in India can talk about governance because we have a full-fledged liberal democratic political system or a polity. So we can talk about the governance, we can raise issues, we can, take to the street, start adopt agitational method to exert educate pressure on the ruling party or the government to carry out certain policy initiative or implement the way we expect the government to do so. But so what I'm trying to highlight here is when it comes to the question of contextual relevance of the topic that some of you have chosen for discussion today, governance, this has to be linked to the global trend. What is the trend? So for 3 decades until 2005, you had the springtime of democracies. From the late 1980s, what late Professor Huntington used to call the second wave of democracy globally. So you had up to 2005, you had upsurge of democratic political system across the world. But 14 years later, by 2019, the number had considerably gone down. Many of these countries which had attempted democratization have experienced lately what is known as democratic backsliding. Means there's a backsliding or the democratic retrenchment, they're back to where they started. That is the typical authoritarian polity. Now, when we talk about, say, 2019 onwards, you'll find the graph, if you look at the graph, then you'll find the rise in the authoritarian state, and you have a corresponding decline in the number of democratizing or the democratic state as such across the globe. So, in a situation, in a global context, when the democratic trend is receding and you have the rising authoritarianism across the world, whether it is in the name of a religion, for example, Iran, theocratic, or it is run by a single party like the CCP, Chinese Communist Party ruled China, PRC, or a one-man dictatorship, the person who remains in office as the president till his death, for example, Rasa, or for example, Turkey, where is a man who is trying to change the identity of the secular modern Turkish Republic into a typical Islamic state. So, and how this man has put behind bar the large number of academicians, scholars. So, similarly, you'll find a couple of tin pot dictators ruling in Sub-Saharan Africa. So, and if you look at Latin America, this transition has itself created political chaos. Nobody knows where it is ultimately leading to. So, in a situation like this, this entire pandemic has, in a way, complicated the process. It has complicated the process because the focus today is on the state, regardless of the nature of the state. Because the state has to ultimately deliver. State has to do its best to bail out the particular national society or the nation. Bail out from here, from the economic decline, the fiscal meltdown, or what I call this, the zooming unemployment rate and the zero GDP rate. In that situation, the focus today is on the state. So when the focus is on the state, so obviously there's a tendency on part of those who represent the state, the ruling elite, to behave in a more undemocratic or authoritarian manner, because ultimately they project themselves, or they are seen as the savior. When a situation like this, you cannot, encourage people to take to the street and go for some kind of agitation, which would simply plunge the particular state into chaos and a quagmire, and out of which there will be no solution as such. So in the given situation, when you take up the governance and development, I think we need to bear in mind
I think again it got disconnected or something,
Yes,
some
sir.
problem.
He's facing some bandwidth issue. Shall you go to the next person?
Bandita,
Okay.
please ask him to unmute.
okay.
Yes.
So
Tell him to unmute.
yeah, it's done. So in a situation like this, when you discuss governance, so you need to understand three component governance. I know some of you have been working on this aspect for years now. I've just gone through the panelists, the esteemed panelists. Some of you are really specialists, some are economists, some are political scientists, or some are pure what I call researcher, work on the governance and developmental issues. I know in the next 2 days you'll be discussing threadbare details on each and every aspect of governance, the structural limitations, the scope for the scope for better governance, what is called good governance. We of course we have a good governance even in a democratic society, but it's better governance in a way. But we need to know what governance is. Governance is generally defined as a process. Yes, grammatically it refers to a process, but it's more than a process. It involves actors, it involves institutions. When I say actors, both the state as well as the non-state actors. And when you talk about the institution, both the formal as well as informal institution. Informal institutions are those which are floated or constituted by a collectivite, a group of people on a specific issue or a context. But more important for all of us here is to reflect the bigger question, which often my students come around asking about it, the dilemma. The dilemma sometimes, could be, could be comparable to chicken and egg kind of situation. Which comes first, state or society? When I mention society here, I'm basically not referring to in sociological term, the social system. Society as understood by the political scientist in the contemporary world refers to civil society. It is called civil society because a society needs to have an element or component of civility. It is civil society and the state, which comes first? Or the second question, is the civil society is antithetical to the state? Can the state exist, survive, sustain itself in the absence of civil society? Or can the civil society survive in the absence of a state? But these are some of these tricky questions which have led to varied interpretation. There are scholars in India, in many universities, including mine, where you'll find they try to, project or, posit civil society vis-a-vis state. No, civil society is not pitted against state. No, the state is pitted against society. I'm referring to democratic state, an authoritarian state. Civil society and state, a democratic state, they coexist. They are not in a, they do not have, they do not share a disharmonious relationship. They exist in harmony. You get a point? So the state is molded by the civil society, and the civil society is molded by the state. You have an interdependence characteristic, which is the, the cornerstone of the relationship between state and society, which is the defining feature of state-society relationship. If you say the society is always pitted against the state, I don't think, the state would simply plunge into chaos. And second, the way some people tend to define civil society by bringing all the uncivil elements, like those who believe in violence, those who resort to physical violence to settle the disputes, those who avoid the kind of dialogue, negotiation, discussion, they are not a part of civil society. The insurgent groups, separatists, or those are anti-systemic, I call them anti-systemic forces, are not part of civil society because they, in the first place, do not accept the legitimation of the political system. Very well. So obviously they are anti-state. So anti-state elements cannot be considered part of civil society. And second, they do not believe in negotiation. They believe in prevailing or they believe in prevailing over others, privileging themselves, their ideas as compared to others. That doesn't happen. Civil society refers to an array of association, movement, groups. It is volitional, it is voluntary. You enter a civil society, come out of it whenever you wish to. Okay. It is a kind of, it encourages associational life. It is sometimes considered as the building block of democracy. So in a way, civil society is not in conflict with the state. On the contrary, state and civil society influence each other, not periodically, but permanently. Because a democratic state, a political system, if the elections are the symbol of democracy, then civil society is the home of democracy. It is in civil society that democracy resides. We need a strong, vibrant civil society. But I'm saying civil society, and civil society institutions, associations are not uncivil. It doesn't include the mafia. It doesn't include the separatist or all kinds of nihilist terrorist groups as part and parcel of civil society. Civil society encourages associational life. It also gives space for all kinds of civil movement. I'm saying civil, peaceful movement. It is constructive. Also, at the same time, it is reactive. It reacts if the state tries to encroach on the sphere of civil society. It is a barrier. It is a protector. Okay. But it is nevertheless not an iron wall separating state from civil society. I'm sorry to say this because that's conceptual clarity has to be brought home by all of you scholars, and that has to be also communicated to the younger students to understand the differences between state and society, civil society, and to clarify they are not at loggerheads. They do not compete each other. They instead exist in harmony. So civil society, so what I'm trying to highlight here is when you look at the civil society, then civil society becomes a part of this whole governance process. So I refer to the informal institution and grouping. If a collection of people create an institution for carrying out a certain governance activity, that need to be also identified, recognized as part of the entire process of good governance. because this is essential when you talk about administrative decentralization and devolution of power, where the centralization had the tendency of encouraging corruption or encouraging authoritarian behavior on the part of the ruling elite. So more the decentralizations, the greater the participation and diffusion of power. Diffusion of power reduces the possibility of concentration of power, which becomes the main source of corruption or the corrupting activities. So this, and third point that I would like to mention here is, see, the whole issue, I'll just take 5 or 7 more minutes. I don't want to bore you guys. You know many things. I know. I'm still in the process of learning much of it. I'm trying to link to the international systemic issues. Basically, I call it foreign policy as a bridging discipline between international relations and the national politics as such. So what I find here is when I look at the issue of governance and development, then I try to understand the history behind it. You know, look at the 1980s. Very interesting history. You know, 1980s entered during the Cold War period. You had ideological division across the world. Ideological, it's called ideopolitical division across the world. And the state in what is today called the global south, earlier called the third world countries or the post-colonial societies, including India, you know, state was projected as a villain. So you'll find all kinds of, you know, article, academic or scholarly papers and articles critical of the state, where the state was, you know, many way autocratic, whether it's a military or civilian autocracy. And there is a reason for that. In a typical post-colonial state, including India, the state became the Maya Baap, because the state, you know, not only monopolized the resources available within a territorially delineated area called state, it also was assigned the responsibility of distributing the resources, monopolizing resources, distribution resources, and collection of revenue as well. The state was projected, was seen by the public as the Maya Baap. So the Maya Baap, you know, concept got so much embedded in the mindset of the average Indian, average third world country citizenry. It became difficult in the 1990s when the majority of states, due to some reason or the other, they decided to adopt the Washington Consensus, that is the economic liberalization or the market economy. So we moved away gradually from a kind of state capitalism, because state controlling resources, the capital generating, state in charge of infrastructure development, everything. So obviously state became the villain naturally, because state had the monopoly over the resources and the distribution of resources. But then the late 1980s, you find, you know, that is say early 1990s, by the eruption of the globalization and economic liberalization, you will find how there is a shift from state as a villain to the necessity of state as an institution. The best example is, you know, that the book written in the late 1980s by Theda Skocpol in America, bringing the state back in, basically highlighting the centrality of the state, because it is ultimately the state which would be in a position to bring about the institutional changes so as to facilitate market economy. It was the state given the responsibility for the regulatory function, for minimizing scope for corruption, for carrying out certain World Bank dictator reforms in the given society. The state emerged as the central actor from a villain to a kind of patron. So by the 1990s, for the developmental activities, in terms of poverty alleviation, in terms of reduction of employment, in terms of infrastructure development, you know, all that actually was going in a very slow pace. That is the reason the state was held responsible for the lack of economic development, even though historically that was not the case. But then in the 1990s, the state captured the center stage. Much of the international community focus was on the state. restoration of the, it's called the renovation of state, or reinstating the state at the central stage, or centering the state, from decentering to centering the state activities, and both in academic discourse, also in the policy making, policy making framework. So what my submission here would be, even if you restore the state to the central position, but what has not happened here is the developmental activities as expected by the international community, particularly UNDP. From time to time, it has been bringing out its report. It today talks about the digital governance, or the e-governance, digitalization. More focus, more emphasis on technology-driven development. But all that ultimately has to be carried out by the local political elite. So the local political elite first has to ensure condition in a given society for the receptivity to this kind of reform and changes. That's one. The conditions have to be created to certain reforms, governmental reforms. You can't simply carry out development model, that is what I call the top-down model, without keeping in mind or without involving the people there. So it is a more people-centric development, and the people-centric development has to be carried out, has to be implemented or realized if you have this, you have proper essential factor. That's where I would like to end here. In social science till date, as a kind of subtext, the debate is still on, but to an extent, the British sociologist Anthony Giddens tried to resolve this dilemma between structure and agency. He coined the terminology called structuration. So we have been talking about this structure, whether it's the global structure or the global economic structure, the global political structure, or the domestic political, economic, and social structure. We have not so much put emphasis on the essential factor, which is important. And based on our experience, the Indian political democracy for last over 7 decades, the essential factor is very important. If Northeast in the last 4 years has seen unprecedented infrastructure development activity, I think the credit goes to the vision of the present leadership. So it's not only a structural problem, all through the non-development, non-inclusiveness of Northeast, either as a discursive practice or as an inseparable part of the government policy, was attributed the structural limitation, inaccessibility, poor connectivity. Oh, they were historically different. No, my dear. The whole narrative build-up was done based on the typical British historiography, to show to the world and to the people, rest of the country, that Northeast people are different from us culturally, historically, which is not the case. So both as a discursive mechanism, as a part of discourse, as well as a part of the policy paradigm, if there are noticeable change today under the present government, then the credit goes to the essential factor. You have a kind of enlightened leadership, which is as much concerned with the developmental aspect of Northeast as much in Delhi or Calcutta or Ahmedabad or Kerala. Because the whole country is seen as a single cohesive uniform unit. This leadership doesn't consider Assam as a small fragment or a minuscule fragment of the larger whole represented by Bharat. This all inclusive approach. It doesn't actually discriminate on the basis of ethnicity, on the basis of religion, on the basis of caste, nothing. You have to undertake the infrastructure development so as to facilitate, one, economic exchange. Number two, FDI investment for industrialization. Number three, it's very important. Number three, the cultural inclusiveness. And fourth, last but not the least, dismantling the psychological barriers which exists in the minds of many of my Northeastern friends, brothers and sisters, as well as some in the mainland India. That psychological barrier needs to be dismantled only when you have the connectivity, only when you have the interaction, constant interaction among the people, both economic, political, and social. That is what is required. The purpose of governance in the context of India is not simply economic development. It is beyond that. I'll just end here with three major objectives, and I would appeal my esteemed colleagues to reflect on this and find out the scope for implementing them, and also highlight the possible or the likely limitations, both the structural limitation and the agential limitation. The first is, as I mentioned, the Northeast no longer, the Northeast of course includes 7 states including Assam, need not cry over exclusiveness. The cultural exclusiveness obviously would be preserved. You know, the linguistic identity obviously would be preserved, would not be simply sabotaged. Never. All of us feel proud of our own mother tongue or lingua franca, native language, native culture. This government underlines the necessity of preserving even the smallest dialect, which is hardly spoken by 15 families in the country, to be preserved. This is part of history. This is our cultural heritage, not to be sacrificed. While encouraging the multilingual approach, we try to preserve whatever we've inherited, including the dialect spoken by the small minority in some corner of either Meghalaya or Assam or Manipur. That has to be preserved. Because the dialects are essential to understand the psychology, to know the history, to know the practices which have been demonized by the British historiographer before their conversion. I will not hesitate in saying this. The way they have been portrayed, all of you are quite well familiar with this history. The history was written not by the Manipuris or the Meghalaya scholar, by the British. The whole historiography is distorted, methodologically misleading. It is basically hegemonizing, and this needs to be contested boldly and constantly so as to create space for new narrative on Northeast to emerge. So, 4 objectives that you have to bear in mind is the function of governance. The better function governance is, as I mentioned, inextricably linked to the nature of the political system, that is democratic, free polity. That has to be preserved. In the pre-polity, you have the right to agitate, to initiate, to react, but not to resort to violence, not to allow the enemies around to have the field day inside my country. That is not acceptable at all, come whatever graph they come, whether the Chinese, the Pakistanis, the Bangladeshis. We need to protect, because remember, when I talk about security, it is not simply territorial security. It refers to my country's or India's, Bharat's ontological security. That is the identity given, and the identity is divinely given to this divine land of Bharat. That has to be preserved, come whatever, at any cost. It is the unique civilization. Nowhere else in the world you'll find it. It has preserved a kind of wisdom. If we translate Bharat into the English word, it is very much close to knowledge society. We are seekers. We are knowledge seekers. We're not simply blind followers of a single book, a single faith, or trust, or whatever religion. There's nothing of religion in this country. We have a diverse practices, diverse belief system. The country today, most of us should feel proud of the fact that the culture of this land has encouraged what I call spiritual democracy. It doesn't impose one pattern, single uniform book, God, or anything on you. It's saying you're free to worship anybody you want, free to adhere anything you want, set of practices and beliefs. So the spiritual democracy today constitutes the foundation of the survival of Indian democracy for over the last 70 years. Name one post-colonial state where democracy was attempted has survived till date. No other country. We started a democracy march without fulfilling the preconditions of democracy. 1950s American scholars say democracy requires certain precondition, that is structural precondition, high literacy rate, better economic quality, what I call the infrastructure. We had nothing. We started our journey. We still remain the largest democracy in the world. The credit goes to our leadership, to our people. More than that, the culture, that culture respect, not simply tolerate each and everybody's faith and belief. That's the reason I always underline that our culture, that is culture of Bharat, is unique. Hence, the Bharat, the nation state, is unique, incomparable. It is sui generis. It cannot be emulated anywhere, nor is it an imitation of nation state model anywhere in the world. So the governance function has to be somehow linked to the very nature of the Indian political system, the cultural basis of the political system. And finally, when you talk of the development only doesn't refer to economic development. It also refers to the dismantling of this sociological barrier. We unfortunately have had a hierarchical society, caste-based society that needs to be dismantled, and that will be dismantled when we change. I call it as a metamorphical transformation of the space. The space gives the legitimacy, a durability to this social hierarchy. That needs to change. That should be one of the major objectives of development. And third is reaching out to all people around. And that will be facilitated through e-governance. Hence, here comes the significance of technology. And fourth is, how do you reduce the cost of any, what I call the provision, services provision rendered by the government, only through e-governance, technology. And finally, we need to also orient our bureaucracy. The bureaucracy often, even today, is seen as the barrier to the easy implementation of government reforms and the policy, because you need to reorient, and it calls for thorough overhauling of the curriculum, which is there in all the training center for the Indian bureaucrats, whether state level or the central level bureaucrats, whether it is in Guwahati or Bhubaneswar or Chennai, or for the central government official in Mussoorie. That needs to change. Need to have more progressive minded intellectual to go and interact with the young bureaucrats. The orientation of the Indian bureaucracy needs to change, including the foreign ministry. They have become to great extent status quoist. Status quoism will not work, my dear. That needs to change. So for that kind of change, we need to also bring about changes in the Indian bureaucracy. And last but not the least, I say the larger goal of Indian development model, which is quite different from typical Chinese model of development. You have economic liberalism accompanied with the political regimentation, okay, or authoritarianism, or Asian model, which was tom-tom about in the 80s, so-called great Asian tigers, when people began to marvel at the economic wonders achieved by the Asian tigers. This kind of model will not work in India. Indian model is quite unique, which may not be easily adopted by many other countries. That is because it is inclusive, it is just, it is transparent. What the development model of India is it is about dismantling the psychological barriers, promoting oneness. Each of us has a commitment to this great nation. We stop thinking what the country does for me. We need to think again what the first Prime Minister of India used to talk about. Don't think what the country will give you. You think what you will give to country. We need to again revisit that particular philosophy, and that I'm I'm quite sure, also the philosophical core of the visionary Prime Minister that the country is lucky to have today, Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He, because of his vision, because of his idea of Bharat rejuvenating India, that is rejuvenating old Bharat as a civilizational entity, becoming the Jagat Guru. So how do you contribute to India? All his program, whether the latest, the self-reliance, Atmanirbhar India, everything you'll find a reflection of basic uniqueness. And second is a strong belief that yes, we can do it. Get out of this kind of skepticism. अरे नहीं होगा, नहीं चलेगा, ऐसे चलता, break that, the cycle. क्यों नहीं होगा? We will prove it. So these are some of these basic ideas which are central to the Indian model of development. That is inclusive, just, transparent, and at the same time it promote the oneness of India. Notwithstanding the diversity that you have, but we do not allow the diverse background to come and negate the larger vision of Bharatavarsha. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your great attention. Thank you. All the best, Dr. Dipanji. I hope the seminar comes out of some fruitful ideas and inputs, which I hope you make the notes at least 2 pages. I submit to you. Try to send it to the Niti Aayog for their consideration, whatever form it is. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, maybe.
Thank you, Professor Ashwini Kumar Mahapatra, sir. You have wonderfully presented your presentation, and you presented how the issues, development and governance, are relevant, and you touch every aspect of these issues. Thank you once again, sir. Now, today we have with us Professor R.K. Satpathy, sir, Director of ICSSR NERC, and Professor Satpathy, sir, has also been working as Professor of the Department of Political Science, NEHU, Shillong. Sir has 40 years of teaching experience and has been guiding a number of PhD and MPhil scholars. Professor Satpathy is also the coordinator of Ek Bharat Shrestha Bharat program, academic counselor of IGNO, editor of the referred journal Men and Society. Professor Satpathy's noted publication we can mention are United States and Central America, Globalization and Traditional System in Northeast India. Now, I request Professor Satpathy, sir, to deliver his keynote speech. Sir.
Thank you, the organizers, especially Dr. Dipen Das. So I was rather a bit hesitant because of certain other engagements, and today I was not very keen to take part in this program, but he insisted that no, be there at least for some time. So that's how I came. So thank you, Dr. Das, and at the same time, thank you the organizers, especially the Center for Ethnic Studies and Research in Guwahati, then again MAGK, Social Science Research Center of Sinamara College, Jorhat, and then again Department of Political Science, Muridad College, and Dhemaji, Assam. So all these organizers, of course, we are also part of your organizing group. It's a rather our pleasure rather to fund some sort of a relevant workshop like this, because as all of you know that governance and development, they are the key issues at present, and almost all are concerned about the issue of development and the issue of governance as well. And as a student of political science, I am more worried about the nature of development that is taking place in our country, and the nature of especially the type of governance that is at present. So that is a matter of concern, of course, about these things. See, democracy, sorry, governance and development, they are the means only. They are the means. they are aimed at achieving certain objectives. And as I feel that perhaps that happiness, satisfaction, good life, so these are some of the things which are the basic objective of each and every individual. And each and every organization, each and every individual also must try how to fulfill this type of satisfaction, and at the same time how they can have a happy, contented, satisfied and good life. Of course, again, it is subject to discussion, subject to interpretation. What is good life? What is some sort of a happy life? So all these things are, I don't like to enter into all those things. But the governance for whom? I always advocate about the horizontal model of governance instead of vertical model of the governance. Because this vertical model of governance talks about the rulers and the ruled. So where generally there will be someone will be rulers and they will try to impose their, you can say that wills and wishes upon the governed. So gone are those days. Nowadays, no one believes in that, and each and everyone speaks about participatory development. Development for whom? Who will be benefited by this development? Is it only economic model of development, or there will be overall development? As all of us we know, now we have come down from state-centric development to individual-centric development. And as all of us know that now individual is at the center of all discussions and all knowledge. Because if individual will not be the beneficiaries, if individual will not get what his due is, then that is not a democracy. That's not. That's why when I speak about horizontal model of democracy, I speak that each and every individual must be a participant of that development, and he also must be the enjoyer of all that development. It must be meant for him, and also in which he must have a stake, he must have a say. What what type of development he needs, that has to be done. And keeping in view of that, of course, Professor Mahapatra was talking about civil society, which is my major area of interest, and I always I have done little work about the civil society. See, of late, people might be observing that we are gradually becoming individual centric. Our social inertness, social interconnectedness is gradually diminishing. And this thing long back in 1980s and 90s, American scholars, Robert Putnam, he spoke, he lamented about the American way of life, and he had written all those things extensively in that book, Bowling Alone. He took a model there from Italy and he tried to compare it with American situation. So from that point of view, he is telling that the social capital of the present generation is diminishing because of this type of so-called marketization of human values, commodification of human knowledge. In all these cases, individual virtually loses his essence, his inertness, his essence, because individual is weighed in terms of his market value. What is my market value? How much we can, if supposing I'll be sold there in the market, how I can be, what is my utility there in the market, the present market? But individual is something much more than this type of marketization. It is something that core human values that needs to be realized. So any development must be aimed at that. It's not only material development. It must be overall development in which individual must feel that, yes, I am a complete being. I am complete being, complete in all respects. And the state must be a facilitator. As you know that now state doesn't have uh, much say nowadays. And I believe that we should not look up to state only, because the state should not be the only provider of some sort of development. So development model must be decentralized and it must be percolated to the civil society. And for that, social capital is the most important thing. Without social capital, we cannot think about any development process. Otherwise, it will be imposed democracy, imposed development. And unfortunate part is that we mark particularly the growth of authoritarian democracy throughout the world. I used to use this word, authoritarian democracy. Democracy is there procedurally. Democracy is there so far as the law of the land is concerned, but in practice it is authoritarianism. And of course, a lot of examples have been given by Professor Mahapatra. I don't want to again repeat all those things. Everywhere in the world, we find that though democratic structure is there, but while functioning, it's not the democratic functioning, it's the authoritarian way of dealing with the things. So from that point of view, unless we try to come down from that authoritarian model to decentralized democratic model in which civil society will play a major role. Civil society must be given centralized or rather a role how to deal with this developmental thing, because the people, because that is the feedback loop. The public generally, they are linked with the state through the civil society only. So civil society knows much more than what is good for the society, what is good for the people, and it acts as the feedback loop between public and the government. And government also must be quite sensitive about how the civil society reacts in the society and how the people, they are connected with the state through the civil society also. So from that point of view, I hope that this week-long workshop, it will be quite beneficial, and especially these young participants who are there, they will be benefited definitely from different speakers. And as it is an international workshop, so people from other countries also, they will share about their knowledge, about their ideas, how this governance will be useful for carrying out the development in different aspects. So from that point of view, I always wish that the governance must be aimed at the overall development, the completeness of the individual. If individual feels that I'm a complete being, then only that governance and that model of development is the best one. So with this, I will stop now, and I wish all success, particularly for this workshop. And I also wish that all the participants who will be there, they must be benefited, and they should go home with some sort of accumulated ideas and knowledge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Satpathy, sir. Within a very short period of time, your speech has really covered entire aspects of the theme of this workshop. And I hope our participants are now more encouraged to take part in the upcoming sessions by your speech. Thank you once again, sir. Today, we have invited Dr. Joseph Patel, sir, as the guest of honor for this inaugural session. Dr. Joseph Patel is the Associate Professor and Head of the Department of Political Science, JT Government Model Degree College, Arunachal Pradesh, affiliated to Rajiv Gandhi University. Dr. Patnaik served as a visiting scholar at the Gulf Studies Program, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Dr. Patnaik was conferred with Outstanding College Teacher Award in 2018 by the government of Arunachal Pradesh. Besides having self-authored books, sir has also contributed more than 75 research articles in various referred journals and periodicals. Now, I request Dr. Joseph Patel, sir, to speak few words about this workshop and to encourage our participants. Dr. Patel,
Yeah.
sir. Okay,
Yeah,
sir.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I thank Dr. Dipen Das, the organizer of this international workshop, and inviting me to be part of this inaugural session. The workshop, which is being conducted for the 7 days on governance and development, I think it has a lot of possibilities and challenges in the context of India's Northeast. India's Northeast, which started with the ethnocultural paradigm, of course, presently marked with the neoliberal paradigm. And in this context, what I feel, the development paradigm has a lot of opportunities and challenges in health, education, infrastructure, and also environment and other related matters. In this week-long international workshop, I'm sure that the experts and the scholars from the different parts of the country as well as world would deliver their lectures on important issues, on the various issues on governance and development. The participants, particularly in this international workshop, they're selected from different parts of the country, would be highly benefited by the scholarly deliberation of the scholars and the think tanks. Of course, I'll also be part of the workshop or the academic engagement program in future. So that is the reason I would like to cut short my lecture today. And since there is paucity of time, I hope the inaugurators will start the academic or technical session very soon. With these few words, I wish all the best to the Center for Ethnic Studies and Governance for the international workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph Patel, sir, for your valuable speech within a very short period of time. Now I request our advisor, Dr. Anil Choike, sir, ex-principal of Moran College, Saraidew, Assam. He is also a scholar of folk culture, and sir has always been guiding us from the very beginning of the planning of this workshop. Now I request Dr. Anil Choike, sir, to speak few words about this workshop. Anil Choike, sir.
Thank you, Vandita Barbara. Thank you all. And thank you, Dr. Dipen Das, for organizing this valuable workshop on governance and development. My respect goes to Professor Ashwini Kumar Mahapatra, Center for West Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Royal University, New Delhi, and Professor R.K. Satpathy, Regional Director, ICSSR Northeastern Region, Center for NERC, and Professor, Department of Political Science, NEHU, and Dr. Jagati Patnaik, Associate Professor, Head of the Department, Political Science, JT, GDMC, Government College, Arunachal, and the family members of this college, Moridal College, Department of Political Science, and Chinamara College, and all the respected members of the Center for Ethnic Study and learned participants. At the very outset, I offer my heartfelt gratitude to all those resource partners assembled here in the inaugural session. And we know that governance is the policy formulation and execution made by the government. The development of a nation depends on how the policies are executed. We sometimes feels that there is a big gap between the policies adopted by the government and executed by the bureaucrats or officials. A nation needs what? A pragmatic education policy, a well infrastructural health service, needs agricultural and industrial development, needs means of communication and transportation, and needs public. Sorry, could you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Continue.
Yes. Needs public health, and above all needs technology and technologically skilled person and good as a civil society. We need technologically skilled person. What is in Assam, in Bagjan, there is a fire. We need expert from outside India. That is the scenery of our country. That we hope that all these pertinent issue will be threadbarely discussed in the workshop. And with these few words, I sum up and thank you once again to all the learned participants and members of this organizing committee. And I wish a grand success of this workshop. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we have come to the end of this program, and I request Dr. Jogesh Das, joint coordinator of this workshop, to give his vote of thanks. Dr. Jogesh Das.
Thank you, Pandita Bobara Madam. Honorable Chairperson, sir, distinguished guests, honorable speakers, and all the participants. It is my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this auspicious occasion. First of all, we are thankful to Chairperson sir, who has guided us from very beginning point of time, cooperate and give valuable suggestions for organizing this workshop. We are also thankful to Professor Sini Kumar Mahapatra sir for his inaugural speech. We are also grateful to keynote speaker Professor R.K. Sarpati sir, Regional Director, ICSSR, NERC, for his deliberation and cooperation, and also making a collaborative program with ICSSR. A very hearty vote of thanks to the guest of honor, Dr. Jajati Patnaik sir. It was an immense honor, pleasure for us that you joined in the event and bestowed us by being guest of honor. I'd like to thanks again to Dr. Anil Shaikya sir. He is our advisor, guide, and so on. From the very beginning point of time, he encouraged us. Thank you, sir. I'd also like to thanks all the teaching and non-teaching staffs of Moidhal College, Dhemaji, and Sinamara College, Johat, for giving their support and making it a collaborative practice. I wish to express my gratitude to Dr. Dipen Das, Organizing Secretary of Center for Ethnic Studies and Research, Dr. Prabhat Sharma, President of Center for Ethnic Studies and Research, Bandita Babara, and all other members of Center for Ethnic Studies and Research for their enormous cooperation in the organizing of this workshop. Last but not the least, I am happy to express vote of thanks to all the esteemed participants who have graced us with their presence. Hope you will be benefited from this workshop. Once again, thank you all. Bandita ma'am, please.
Thank you, Dr. Das. With all this, we come to the end of this program, and I declare that our inaugural session is over. We will have our first technical session after a short break with a short tea break of 10 minutes. We will meet here again. Our resource person has already joined with us, and I request all the participants not to leave this platform. We will again meet in this platform after 10 minutes. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. Big hand to all of you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All of you. Thank you, Dipen. Thank you, Bandita.
Thank you, Dipen. Go ahead. All the
Thank
best.
you, sir.
Yes, sir. We hope we will again meet here, sir.
Yeah, hopefully we'll meet again. We'll catch up. Okay. All the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Yes.
Dipen, all the
Oh, sir.
best for
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
coming 7 days.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Bondita,
কোৱা
আমি ভাবিছো যে আমি
বৰুৱা ছাৰ আছে ন
আছে আমি ভাবিছো আমি 10 মিনিট সময় ব্ৰেক এটা দিও নেকি ইয়াতে
কৈছো
আমি
মই
আকৌ লগ হ'ম নহয় আমি আকৌ লগ হ'ম
ইয়া হৈছে
মই কৈছোৱে
না তুমি কৈছা মই ভাবিছো কি এতিয়া আমি এতিয়া এৰি দিও নেকি প্লেটফৰ্মটো
তুমি এনেকৈ লগাই থৈ দিলেও হ'ব নহ'লে লিভ কৰি পিছত জইন কৰিলেও হ'ব
কাৰণ বস্তু লাইভ হৈ আছে যে 10 মিনিট এনেকৈ থাকিব হয়নে
হয়
বৰুৱা ছাৰ নিচাৰ বৰুৱা ছাৰ আছে নেকি ইয়াতে ছাৰ নিচাৰ ছাৰ এটা কথা কৈছে বুজিছেনে বন্দিতা মানে সকলো পাৰ্টিচিপেণ্টকে আনমিউট কৰাৰ ব্যৱস্থা কৰি দিব পিছে ছাৰৰ প্ৰেজেন্টেচনটো পিছে এটা মানে ইন্টাৰেকচন হ'ব আদাৰৱাইজ দে উইল ফিল বৰ সামথিং লাইক দিস
ইন্টাৰেকচনৰ টাইমত আনমিউট কৰিলে হ'বনে প্ৰেজেন্টেচনৰ টাইমত ছাৰক সুধি ল'ব লাগিব
সেইটো সুধি ল'ব লাগিব
হেল্ল' শুনি পাইছে নে আপোনালোকে শুনিছে নে
ছাৰ শুনা পাইছো হয় ছাৰ
ঠিকে আছে অলপ ইন্টাৰেক্টিভ হ'লে ইন্টাৰেষ্টিং হ'ব নেকি নহ'লে বহুতে অলপ বড়ো হয়তো সো আপুনি তেওঁলোকে মই কৈ দিম যেতিয়া যাৰ যেতিয়া ইচ্ছা কৰে দে কেন ষ্টপ মি এণ্ড ইণ্টাৰভিউ লগৰ কমেণ্ট চমেণ্ট দিব পাৰে
they can raise their hand
they can raise their hand they can speak
and will unmute okay
they can speak directly so interactive হ'লে অলপ ইন্টাৰেষ্টিং হ'ব নেকি নে কি কয়
স্যাৰ মানে ফাৰ্স্ট প্ৰেজেন্টেচনটো হৈ গ'লে তাৰ পিছত ইন্টাৰেকচনটো হ'লে ভাল হ'ব নেকি প্ৰেজেন্টেচনটোত মানে নহ'লে বেছি
প্ৰেজেন্টেচনটো আপোনালোকে একো হুলস্থুল চাওঁ লেট আছ ট্ৰাই লেট আছ খুলি দিয়কচোন চাওঁ কি কয়
ওকে স্যাৰ
হ'লে
10 minutes break to গৈ লওক
গৈ লওক তাৰপিছত
ছাৰ আপোনাক দেখা নাই ছাৰ বহুত দিন দেখা নাই আপোনাক চাওঁ ছাৰ
খুলিমে ঠিক আছে